Bem-vindos ao Podcast ADEGA, o mais influente podcast de vinhos do Brasil. Bastidores, conversas e entrevistas exclusivas sobre o fascinante mundo do vinho.
Well, we are here with nothing less than Michel Chapoutier to talk about M.Chapoutier, wines and vineyards and everything. And thank you very much, Mr. Michel, for accepting to have this conversation with us.
You're welcome.
I would like for you to start telling a little bit about the history of the company and your history. We can move from that on.
So Chapoutier is based in Hermitage. So it's southeast of France, between Lyon and Marseille, and I would say on the Rhone Valley. The Rhone Valley is an interesting point because on the different sides of the Rhone, you have plenty of different soils. A big part of granite, but you have also some sediments. We will see when we will taste an Hermitage. It is a good example where you have in a small appellation the 4 geological ages. So the origin of Chapoutier is from Ardèche. It is a poor area in the mountains, not high mountains, and where people were living just by farming. And the people of Chapoutier moved to the valley to start to work in the vineyards. And I was the 6th generation of this. And me, when I arrived, Chapoutier was owned by my grandfather and driven by my father. But Chapoutier was a quite old and tired company. When I was a student, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work in California. And what impressed me was the dynamic of the New World wines, but where the New World wines were extremely marketing oriented and in the same time extremely winemaker oriented. You know, when you speak of the New World wines, you always speak of the winemaker. You never speak of agronomy. You speak of winemaking. You speak of brands. And when I came back in France, I said, okay, maybe they are more dynamic than the old Europe by the way they work in marketing and by the way they work in enology. But the strong point of the old Europe is the 20th century of history in the wine. You know, Christian, what is important to understand is a vine can have some roots which are going down very deeply. When I say deep, I speak about that can be 100 meters deep. So very deep. And around these roots, if you watch in the microscope, there is a strong microbiological life. And the vine, the roots of the vines, are transforming, digesting century after century the soil to make the soil better and better for the vineyard cultivation. And that was the strong point of the old Europe. But if you want to have a good terroir, you need to have a soil alive. And a soil alive means that you need to have a high density of microbiological life. So when I arrived, I said, okay, the strong point of the old Europe, of the French wines, of the Rhone Valley wines, is the ability to express the soul in the wine. And I became like that, one of the first to decide to do biodynamic in 1901.
Yes, incredible, because it was so early in the process, even in the knowledge of biodynamic, don't you?
Yeah, and you know, I've bought the company for my grandfather in 1990, and I started to make the first experimentation in biodynamic. The philosophy was not an ecological approach. It was a scientific approach. I wanted to have the farming attitude, which was working with the life of the microbiological life. That's mean I didn't want with names which are finishing by IDE, like herbicide, fungicide, insecticide, because when you speak of IDE, you speak of death. And when you speak of death, you bring the death in the life of the soil. And the contrary of the death is the life, is bio. And I chosen the biodynamic culture because it was even more efficient than the organic farming to have the most dynamic activity, microbiological activity in the soil.
Okay.
So that's
Why do you say a more efficient? How do you measure that? It's in terms of pragmatic observation, or do you perform some tests? How do
of
you?
course. Uh, the When you speak of the microbiology, we had a guy. His name is Claude Bourguignon in France, who did some books. The name is Le Sol, la Terre et les Champs. That's mean the soil, the earth, and the fields.
Yes.
And he was one of the first person who focused on the microbiological activity. So when you speak about life in the soil, of course you will take care of worms on all the insects, but in the same time you will take 1 gram and you will be able to make a calculation of how many bacteria you will have
Okay.
by cubes centimeters. Um, it is in the same thing when you never use manure, you use composted manure. We call
Okay.
that compost. And the difference between organic manure compost and a biodynamic compost is that you have 1 million times more bacteria in the biodynamic compost than in the organic compost.
Okay.
And
Do
as
you
you
do
know,
you at- do you attribute it to the dynamic of creating the composts in the biodynamic experiment, the ability to bring energy and other things to the compost? Is that so?
so I should say at first when you speak about farming, there is two art for the farmer: the plowing and the composting.
Okay.
If I plow, I should know what is the deepness of the plowing if I open the soil, because I have some anaerobic soils under, some aerobic on the top, anaerobic
Aerobic.
under. So I have to be careful. That's the first thing, which is the life between these two bacteria. And when you speak about compost, and I remember one day I did a conference with organic farmers in California, and they were using fresh manure. And I said, if you use fresh manure, it's like if you are chemical farmers,
Yes.
because there is no difference between the nitrogen in a chemical fertilizer than in a fresh manure. All the art is in the fermentation of this manure. And finally, the goal is not the richness, but we should watch that like I don't know how we say that in English, a levain, when you prepare for the yeast, that gives
Okay.
the power of the fermentation. So finally, it's not the organic richness, it is the microbiological richness.
Okay. Great.
I will
I,
say that the manure of worms is more important than the manure of cow, finally.
and when you started in 1991 to, of course, you must have been a pioneer in your region. How people accepted that?
All in the beginning, they were laughing. When I bought the winery was on the point to make bankruptcy. So
Okay.
plenty of winemakers were very nice with me because I was young. They were sure that I was on the point to make bankruptcy, and they were nice with me because they wanted to buy my vineyards. But after 3 or 4 years, when they saw that I was not doing bankruptcy, so they started to be more jealous sometimes, And but in the same time, slowly and slowly, people saw the results. Today, I'm the president of Hermitage. Hermitage is 98% of the appellation is organic farming, not biodynamic, but organic, which is
Yeah.
people are not using herbicide, they plow, they don't use insecticide, herbicide, all these things,
But we are talking about almost half century for this transformation in mentality and this kind of thing. So you assumed the company very young, with 26 years old. So
Yes.
it's incredible how you did it, to arrive with such an innovation. First of all, to be able to buy the company at this early age, then taking
Uh,
care of the business side, and then bringing new ideas to the field. And so it's congratulations. It's amazing. I'm entrepreneurship as well, so it's nice to see it happen this way. And you're still young, so there's a lot of things ahead.
Still younger, still younger.
And but you were telling me about the transformation of Chapoutier during this time. You started with biodynamics, then you have gone to different terroirs, bringing other terroirs to your, let's say, to your company or to your vineyard collection.
The the big difference we could have between the old Europe and the new world wines, it's like when we speak about marketing, in the new world wines, it was very often, not always, but very often, the marketing of the ask, like in the beer. They make the marketing of the ask, the marketing of Mr. Kotler. What do you want as consumer? I will do what you like. That's mean that the products go to the consumer. You ask it. When we are in AOC or AOP organization, we are here to take a pictures of the terroir. And we are in the marketing of the offer, which is different. I don't ask you what you like. I just show you what I do. And then I will explain you what I do. And if you like, if you don't like, maybe you will like after the explanation. Just to give an example, when I was young in a classical class, in a music class, the teacher was listening music, and we said, oh, not nice music. Then after the music teacher was explaining the music, and after 2 or 3 times, we said, no, finally, it's extremely interesting. That is the marketing of the offer. We didn't change the product, but we caught the consumer to and helped him to understand the product. When you are in the Rhone Valley, where you have some limestone, where you have some granite, some schist, some mica schist, and you have the same grape, monogrape, what is interesting? You said, okay, here you have a wine from granite, here a wine from limestone, same grape, same vintage, same vine growing, same wine making. The only one difference is the soil. By subtraction, you can see how the soil can speak. And that was the originality. I said, okay, we make AOP. The winemaker is the painter who is making the signature in the corner of the painting, not on all the painting. So you must not find a house taste with the winemaker. You can find a style. For instance, I say there is no house taste. I consider that the appellation has to speak louder than the style of the winemaking of Chapoutier. But because we are food lover, because we work for the gastronomy, you will always see some subtlety in our wines. First things you will see a crescendo between the nose, the taste, the aftertaste. Second thing, you will have in the white wine very often the saltiness. Not easy to extract saltiness in a white wine. That's mean you need to have not only a low yield, but a very high microbiological activity. And so that is the particularity that's been the signature in the corner of the painting is our obsession is the wine is done to be married with food. And
Did you change?
Yes,
Sorry.
go on.
Go ahead, please.
Too often, I would say on a sociological point, it was the winemaker who was choosing the wine or the food which was sacrificed to make the wine better. One of the worst example is Sauterne and foie gras. If you put a Sauterne and foie gras, the Sauterne will be good, but you kill the Sauterne. The Sauterne will be good, but you kill the foie gras. So all the work we did was at each time we make a wine, like in a good marriage. We don't want to make a machist wine. We want to have a wine with complementary with the food. We don't want the wine to dominate the food. And because we make a wine of gastronomy, sometimes, by example, you don't have a strong nose because the power and the concentration will be in the length of the wine. So sometimes the consumer would just want to have the wine in aperitif, can be disappointed by the nose because we don't make cold fermentation. We don't use selected yeast. We work with wild yeast. So we will have a saturity. We will not have the power.
All right. When you were speaking, I was thinking, okay, you look to gastronomy and you had the experience of living in US and also, of course, in France. And now gastronomy has became much more globalized. Do you think that the wines that are made for or envision the French cuisine have the same style that the wine that goes to all over the world, for instance, to Brazil? Or Brazil, we have a very global gastronomy, but in Asia and this kind of thing as well.
If you permit me, Christian, I will make a little correction.
Go ahead.
When the French wine industry was sick in the 80s, because people were selling appellation, but sometimes you were disappointed by the wines. On the same time, the French gastronomy was tired because it was expensive food, lobster, foie gras, truffles. And
Right.
the first concurrence was the Italy, who arrived with pasta and to make the gastronomy with pasta. And in the 80s, the French gastronomy was heavy, was late, retrograde,
Yes.
and on the point to die. And then it is the bistronomy who saved the French gastronomy. And the French gastronomy today has nothing to see with what it used to be. And there is a notion of fusion. The fusion is not only in Great Britain or in South America. The fusion, when you go to Trois Gros, when you go to Aleno with all these 3-star Michelin, you have this fusion.
Yes.
And we wanted to taste the wine. I think it was the Chantalette. Maybe you have the bottles with you?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, we will taste because that will be a good illustration. When you taste a wine like the Chantalette, let's see. When you have a wine like the Chantalette, plenty of white wines, people are looking for the level of acidity, the freshness. For me, you have 4 flavors. The primitive flavors, sugar, acid. The noble flavors, salt, bitter. What is interesting, we don't work with primitive flavors. We work with those. So when you have in the taste, you feel the saltiness. And behind, you feel the noble's bitterness. And what is interesting, for example, the best marriage with this wine is a curry lamb.
Nice.
Spicy food. I love spice. I love to cook, and my wife is always complaining because I use too much spice. But I consider that extremely interesting to play. So, of course, when you use spice, you have a migration of tannins from the skin and from the seeds. Like you have, that's cousin tannins of the grape. And so if you have a spicy food, you will take a white wine. But if you have a white wine with a high level of acidity, then you will wake up the burn of the spice. And that's a perfect example where you have the complexity of this one, which is 100% Marsanne. And you will have here, have you remarked the length? The nose is not very powerful. You have the honey. You have also honeysuckle, rhubarb. So plenty of complexity. But when you have that in the place, the saltiness We should remark also the level of CO2, the carbonic gas. We are obsessed during the élevage. We want to keep some carbonic gas because that's permit to drop the level of sulfate. We can have a lower level of sulfate because we arrive to keep some CO2 from the fermentation, and that is also antioxidative. So that's a perfect example. That's a wine length, and a wine at that which is we can play with meat, we can play with spice, and I really believe that today, even the tradition gastronomy you will find all over the world are more and more fusion.
Yes, of course.
When Yannick Aleno opened at La Mumia, the restaurant, he asked to the workers in the restaurant to go to see their grandmother and to come back with recipes of traditional Moroccan recipes. Then after, he worked that with the high gastronomy feeding. So that is interesting to see the evolution of the gastronomy, which is like the evolution of the population in the world. It's more and more a mixed population.
And globalized in any way.
Exactly.
Everybody goes to every place. No? It's incredible. Very nice. This would be a good example of wine to tell us a little bit more about Hermitage, and then we can move to. So
We move to the Hermitage Red.
yes,
So
we can.
Hermitage,
We can bring the subject of Hermitage as a terroir, as a region, and move to the style, and then from that we can move to the red wine as well.
the secret of Hermitage. The secret of Hermitage finally is a very small vineyard of 130 hectares, and it is at the crossing point between the Rhone, the Central Massif granite, and the Prealps. So you have, when you watch Hermitage, you have from the north to the south, or to the west to the east, you have primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary geological period in a so small handkerchief. And the white, origin of Hermitage, when Thomas Jefferson was American ambassador in France, was during the Revolution, probably he considered it was more safety to be in the wine area than in Paris. And he became one of the first wine writer, finally. And when he spoke about the White Hermitage, he said, White Hermitage is with no doubt the best white wine in the world. And at the end of his letter, he said, but you will be surprised. They try also to make red wine there. So, end of the 18th century, the red wine of Hermitage was more for local degustation or for medical wine. I explain. Vin médecin, not medical for medical human, but what we have an expression, a verb, which is to hermitage. That's mean a big part because it's 100% Syrah. The science has proved 30 years ago with Carol Meredith and Jean-Michel Boursico that the parents of the Syrah are the Dureza and the White Mondeuse. And the birthplace of the Syrah is around Hermitage. And Hermitage had the Syrah had a quite high concentration of tannins with a quite interesting percentage of alcohol. So very often 10-20% of the Hermitage was sold to Bordeaux to fortify the wines of Bordeaux. And in the 19th century, Hermitage was beginning of 19th century. Hermitage was more expensive than Bordeaux. So you had some chateau of Bordeaux where it was written Chateau Hermitage on the labels, like a guarantee. Is for that the chateau could be more expensive if you had a drop of Hermitage in. And if you read the history of Chapoutier, the origin of Chapoutier is 1808. The truth that is the origin of the society, of the company, but not the beginning of the Chapoutier family, because in 1808, it was the company was created by the Calvé family, they were from Hermitage, but they moved to Bordeaux. You know the brand in Bordeaux, Calvé? They are from there. So when they moved, because when they arrived in Bordeaux to sell the Hermitage, they said, oh, easier to work on flatland than on the slope of Hermitage. And then they sent their shares of their company, and it was the family Fogelgesang, then after Delépine, then after Chapoutier. So the age of this company is not from Chapoutier, but from Calvé. And so now you have here a Cizeron. We make some single vineyards. Single vineyards is where we take the pictures of the terroir. But because I like also the tradition, we wanted to do the wine like the historical tradition. In the historical tradition, people used to make Hermitage with a part of granite, a part of sediment, and a part of limestone or pudding. And then here you have a wine with the blending of Bessard, Greffieux, and Méal, which is the only one Hermitage we do with blending of 3 different soil by respect of the tradition. You have this signature in the nose of the Syrah, characteristic, the violet. You have also the blackberry, the licorice. And interesting, systematically, we have this smell, this little smoke smell. I will say it's this star. You know, I have an old farm of the 16th century, and the smell of the fireplace. No,
Okay.
that the soot. It is not only graphic; there is soot.
This is a great explanation of this smell. I always had it associated with the Hermitage and with the good Syrahs, and now you explained very bad. Thank you.
The wine that can age 100 years, then.
Yes, I fell in love with the white one. It's an incredible wine because it can bring the fruitness of the wine and keep the vibrancy that is required to a very gastronomic wine as well. But in Brazil, I think that the red Hermitage is more known over the consumers because we drink too much more red wines than white wines, but it is changing. So I'm glad to see that we have two great wines, and I was speaking with the people from World Wine that the price point is very good for the high quality that we have it in here. I will talk to my team to have some, probably some of them in our wine club as well. They are both incredible wines, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear you describing these wines. Which brings me to something. Your vision of wine is this. Well, you drink wine from all over the world, I heard, and you like to taste and you like to experiment things. And how do you see the vision of what is a good wine changing from the 90s to now? We passed through very bad moments in I think from 2000 to 2008 or something like this. We call it dark age sometimes. And how do you see that?
If you permit me, I will maybe give my point of view, but starting in the 19th century.
Good. Much better.
The wine industry is the first farming industry, agricultural industry, who arrived to make a difference between quality and quantity. How? By the percentage of alcohol. In the 19th century, a wine of 11% of alcohol was more expensive than a wine of 10% of alcohol. First time that farmers could, by working better, earn more, and not by producing more.
Okay.
And then that was the obsession during all the 20th century of the alcohol. More I have alcohol, better is it. After the war, explosion of the ask everybody what they do to have some French wine. The big mistakes are done on clone selection, where people have high yield, dilution, but high level of alcohol. Then arrived the 80s, 90s, where people said, okay, no, the wine, we want to have wine with more concentration. They are too light in alcohol, not too light in color, not extra. So then people go back to have lower yield to extract more. But they go so far that at a certain time you had the impression that you were obliged to have a knife and a fork to taste the wine.
Yeah.
And what is interesting is that today, the new evolution is people realize that you don't need to go so far in the extraction and you don't need to have so much alcohol and so much maturity. And then we rediscover the quality of the wine. In the same time, why people are discovering the white wines? Because the young generation has always drink things which were coming from the fridge. So they can have rosé, they can have white wine, but when they take a red wine, they said, no, not in the fridge. But they don't like to have room temperature. And it's probably also for this reason that the white and the rosé wines have a strong progression, because the generation who had always soda or other water from the fridge, they don't like to have room temperature. And the problem of the red wines, if you taste them with room temperature, the level of alcohol start to be burning. So what is interesting today, we need to go to look for a good extraction of the tannins, but not too much. And we need to not go too far, even if the evolution of the climate sometimes is arriving to push the level of alcohol quite high. So, for instance, in 20 years, in the style at Chapoutier, we are changing this last year's our style. In the past, I was doing 100% distemps.
Okay.
I didn't want to have stems. Now, for instance, I let more and more often, I let 20%, 25% of stems. Because when you ferment with stems, you waste sugar. So you drop the level. You can drop sometimes to quite 0.8% the level of alcohol.
Incredible.
But if you have the stems, you need to go farther in the maturity, because you don't need to have stems in herbs, but stems in wood. Linification of the stem. The last wine is the Barbarac. You have it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Wait. So we change completely the style. We go to the south of the Rhone Valley. We are here 100% Grenache. But if you watch the map of the Rhone, you see at the moment the Rhone is moving, is making a contour, And here we are in the old bed of the Rhone. So we are on Rolling Stone, puddle, sediment. So we will look for the salinity. And what I love in the Grenache, I don't like the blending of the Grenache, because here you could have sometime when you taste a Châteauneuf du Pape 100% Grenache with which is 60 or 70 years old, you can be confused in the blind tasting, because you can think it's a Pinot Noir sometimes.
Okay.
They're aged like a Pinot Noir very often. And you have the touch of white cherry. You have also the pink pepper. And you remark the velvety of the tannins here. That's important for me. And long skin contact to have a polymerization of the tannins.
Yeah. And it's very young and it's still very approachable. It's something that is changing a lot in terms of Chateauneuf du Pape.
You know, if you are in a winery and you every day we have some new vat and you taste every day the vats, you will remark that the maximum of bitter extraction will be the fourth or fifth day.
Okay.
And if you wait after the alcoholic fermentation, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, after a certain time, the bitterness in 2 days will disappear. And you have this polymerization. So we always have a long skin contact, not to over extract, it is to under extract. Because some tannins which are unstable, the first tannins which were extracted, will naturally, by osmosis, go back to the skin.
All right. I didn't know that. This is...
No, that's always interesting when we make tasting during the fermentation, because we see, that's hard. And after around 18, 20 days, that depends the vintage, sometimes 25 days, in 2 days, the wine change. And the texture of tannin change completely.
And to be able to keep the wine for in such a long contact with skins, it probably requires a lot of let's say care with the temperature.
Exactly.
Is that so? Okay.
So we work on concrete.
Okay.
Because we work on the energy. We need to have a thermic energy. The best volume of a vat is around, I would say, between 80 and 110, because on the beginning, the concrete will take the calories, and when the fermentation is finished, the concrete will give back the calories. You can't do that on stainless tank because after the fermentation, the temperature will drop, and then you will have a vegetal taste.
Okay.
And that's so all the subtlety of this work is how we keep it at a good temperature, because under, I would say, 23, 24 degrees Celsius, then the herbal taste is arriving, and then you have to rack.
I would like to get back a little bit more to talk about the steam. We see that steam is very important to some varieties, and mainly for Syrah. Syrah responds very well to fermentations with steams.
Pinot Noir also, huh?
Pinot Noir also. Yes. That's another similarity with the things that you do. But you were telling that with the steams you decrease the level of alcohol, but in order to get to the right point of the steams, you probably have a riper grape as well. So it's a counterbalance effect. You bring more sugar in the first moment, then you take it out with a little bit with the steams. And how do you see that? Because people are talking more and more about less alcohol, and I think that everything is in the balance and not in a single number in the label. I would like to see how you see that, and how do you bring it to your wines?
Christian, we don't increase so much the level of sugar, because when we want to observe the good maturity of the stems, in the same time we observe what we call the phenolic maturity, which is the maturity of the tannins.
All right.
And we always harvest by watching the maturity of the tannins and not the maturity of the sugar. And it's interesting to see when I started in the 80s to make a pavillon, for instance, it was harvesting at 12% in alcohol in potential. And we had at this level the good phenolic, and we use some to chaptalize it to wine point.
Okay.
Now, the same phenolic maturity, we have it at 13.5, 14.
Okay.
So when the tannins are mature, the stems are mature. That means we would never have to harvest it before to have less sugar, because we consider that is the maturity of the phenols and the anthocyanins, which is the most important. And of course, because the problem is that we arrive with a higher level of alcohol. But if you have a 14.5% of alcohol, because you had to wait to have the good maturity, if you say you let some stems, then you can drop off a half a degree.
Good. Which brings me to another wine of yours that I like very much, which is Marius. That's I think it's the simplest wine that you have here in Brazil, in the interest level wine that you have in Brazil, but I have appreciated very, very much, and it has 14% of alcohol, but it has some very much freshness in it, and it's very elegant and direct wine, and it brings fresh fruit and other things. And this is a good example of what you were talking about. You can have you don't get fixated with the level of alcohol. You bring it to the whole wine. Is that so?
Yeah, no. For me, it's like if I am a chef of a star Michelin restaurant and I have a bistro on the side. That when we make a wine like Marius, the idea is to say, okay, we will not make a carbonic fermentation, we will not make a thermovinification, we will just make a long skin contact like we will do. The other people will do with 7 days. We say, no, we want to have 15 days, 3 weeks, to have a polymerization of the tannins. That's mean even for these wines, which are sometimes coming from very old vines, because in these places, that's wine region which are more poor. So they don't change so often the vineyard. But the good thing is that they have some very strong quality vineyards for a very affordable price. So the relationship between price and quality is amazing. And then we say, but with these grapes, we have to treat them like if it was a cru. And for that, we say, so it's not us who are vinifying, because that would cost us too much. We are working with wineries, but with a protocol and with a longer contact. And that's permitted to have a price so competitive.
Good. It's incredible. I would. There is one history regarding your wines, which is Cizeran. I would like you to tell, because it brings a lot the braille. I don't know how to say that in English.
The braille on the label, yeah.
Yes, the braille on the label, and now the name has a connection. I would like to have you explain this history and this movement that you did to bring braille to the bottle.
So the braille is not Mr. Braille. Louis Braille had only the idea of the braille, but the braille, the idea has been transformed in reality by Maurice de la Cizeran. There were three boys in the family of the Cizeran. The first become painter, the second become writer, the third was supposed to be the winemaker. And then he had an accident and he became blind. And he created the World Association of Blind People, and he transformed the idea of Braille in reality by the braille. Because of this accident, my great-grandfather could buy the best vineyard of Hermitage, which were owned by the family of La Cizeran. And to thank him to have the good idea to have this accident and to become blind like that, he was able to sell us the property. I wanted to put the brands on the labels.
Nice, nice. It's and you decide to do it as well as a homage to in the name of the wine.
Yeah, exactly. But we know that we had that for all the wines now. The brand.
Nice. No, I see the brand. And let me go move to probably your last issue for me to keep in the time frame that I agreed with World Wine in your schedule. Uh, your company, M.Chapoutier, goes in two directions. In one direction, you have single vineyards, labels, very small production labels, and superb incredible, unique wines like art. And on the other side, you are able to bring joys from Rhone to in a much broader spectrum. And how do you manage to do that? And do
I
you
would
have
say
two mind frames, or it's a single mind frame? Ron, in my opinion, in Brazil, or in probably not in US, but in Brazil, we don't. It doesn't receive the attention that it should receive, which brings us to more affordable wines than, for instance, if you try to bring the best wines in Bordeaux or in Burgundy, in Rhone, you still find very good price quality relationship. And well, I think I mixed two questions, but I would like you to help me to solve the first one and the second.
um, so there is 2 points. There is at first the wine is a question of pleasure, and very often you hear people say, I like wine, but I don't know about wine. Sometimes I said, but you don't need to be gynecologist to make love. So you don't need to be enologist to taste a wine.
Yeah.
There is a snobism, a dangerous snobism in the wine. People need think they have to know. It's a question of pleasure. It's not a question of brain. And so that's the first point. And I said for this reason, I want also to make affordable, easy wine. And the second thing, you can be an opera singer and you can love the rock, the jazz, or the disco. And
Yes.
and it's like not because you have a three-star Michelin restaurant and you like to eat in a three-star Michelin restaurant that you don't like pizza. And I really believe that to make an expensive wine is quite easy because you don't count after your spending everything which is exclusive. Then after you make the calculation, you make your price. You said, okay, this costs 10% of the price of the cost. I do it. This costs 20% of the cost of the price, but increase the quality of 1%. I do it. But so it's easy. You have no limit to make the highest quality. When you want to make an affordable wine, then it's a challenge. It's like in ice skating. You have the free movement and the imposed movement. So I consider that the winemaker has to do the free movement, like the single vineyards, by the imposed movement for the affordable wines. That's the good balance. If you love the wine and you want the wine to have a democratization.
Great.
Voilà,
And
Christian.
go ahead, please.
No, it's okay. No,
So, and you are not only focused on France and Rhone, but you move it to other countries and other directions and other terroirs, and you keep looking for it and discovering it. Can you bring me a little bit of your idea of seeing wine or perceiving wine as a global subject with different terroirs all over the world?
No, when I started to do that, I would say 25 years ago, I just wanted to show, even more than 25 years, 30 years ago, I wanted to show that a terroir was efficient terroir, the soil, the climate, and the human. And there were some potential terroir interesting to observe. So we did some experiment in Australia, in Portugal, in Spain, in Alsace, and so that was just to show that in places that we could do. For instance, in Australia, people say, "Oh, you come to make a French wine." I say, "No, we come to make an Australian wine of terroir, and not a French wine."
And you were able to apply the biodynamic culture everywhere. People and how is how
Not
does
so
it
easy
happen?
because, for instance, in Australia, to have some cow manure is extremely difficult.
Okay.
How do you make a cow manure? You need to have the cow in winter inside. Then you have the manure. When in Australia the cow are outside all the year, you can't have cow manure,
Yeah.
So you have to change. It is an adaptation. So, but after we adapt. Uh, when you make biodynamic, and that's after I have to go because I have another meeting
Yes.
now starting. When you make biodynamic, you work with herbs of your place. And my coach in biodynamic has worked in South America. He has worked in Africa, and sometimes there were some plant that in the place he was, they didn't know this plant. So usually he said, "Okay, you have a sorcier, you have a person who knows the tradition. This plant is connected with Saturn, for instance. What is the plant you have in your place traditionally, which is connected with Saturn?" And people were thinking, "But that is this plant." Okay, so we will replace by this plant, and it was
Nice.
each time efficient.
Very good. Very good. I don't want to take more of your time.
Thank you,
I have
Christian.
much more than 27 minutes that we agreed upon. So thank you very much for your time and the lessons. I hope to see you soon in Brazil.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye. Bye bye.